I'm sorry, but this is where it ends for you.
I watched my husband drive away knowing he'd left me there to die. I need to tell you something I've never said out loud. My husband, Harold, the man I'd made breakfast for every morning since 1982, left me in the middle of Ashdown Forest on a Tuesday afternoon, fully believing I'd be dead by nightfall. And the strangest part? I let him. I can still see his face as he positioned my wheelchair between two oak trees. His hands were shaking, not from guilt, mind you, but from excitement poorly disguised as concern.
Right then, Eileen,
he said, adjusting my blanket, with the sort of tenderness you'd use on a houseplant you were planning to bin.
I'm just popping to the car park to fetch the flask. Won't be a tick.
I looked up at him, my Harold with his M&S jumper, and I said exactly what a frightened, paralyzed wife of 42 years should say. Don't be long, love. It's getting rather chilly. He patted my hand, twice, like you'd pat a dog you were leaving at the vet's. And then he walked away. I sat there listening to the crunch of autumn leaves under his shoes, getting softer and softer until there was nothing left but the sound of wind through the trees and a wood pigeon somewhere overhead. I thought, so this is what it comes to. Not a row. Not even a proper conversation. Just being left behind like an old sofa on the pavement. But here's the thing no one knows. Not the police. Not my daughter Claire. Not even my GP who signed all those medical forms. I could already walk. For 6 months I'd been pretending. 6 months of sitting in that god-forsaken wheelchair, dribbling into my cardigan, watching Homes Under the Hammer on repeat, letting Harold believe I was finished. Because 6 months earlier, on a perfectly ordinary Wednesday, I'd heard something that changed absolutely everything. I was meant to be napping. Harold thought I was asleep in the bedroom, but I'd woken early and was sitting in the hallway just outside the kitchen door. He was on the phone. His voice was low, careful. The voice he used when he was booking restaurant tables or returning faulty purchases to John Lewis.
I know, darling. I know it's hard. Darling?
In 42 years, Harold had called me love approximately 3 times, and all of them were by accident. Then I heard her voice, tinny but clear enough through the speaker. I just don't know how much longer I can wait, Harold. You promised, you said when she was gone.
And she will be.
Harold interrupted, glancing toward the hallway. I held my breath.
The doctor said it could be any time. The strokes left her. Well, she's not really there anymore.
Is she? And when it happens, the house is ours.
The pension, too. We can finally have our life, Fiona.
Fiona! Fiona from the bridge club. Fiona who'd brought a Marks & Spencer's lemon. Drizzled to my birthday tea last year and told me I looked ever so well considering. I sat there in that hallway in my nightdress from Debenhams, holding onto the banister, like it was the only solid thing left in the world. And I made a decision. I would give them exactly what they wanted. A helpless, silent Eileen. But not the ending they'd planned. Because what they didn't know, what Harold still doesn't know, is that I'd already stopped being his wife the moment I heard that phone call. I'd become something else entirely. I lowered myself into the wheelchair that very afternoon. I stopped speaking. I let the drool gather at the corner of my mouth. I stared at the television like I couldn't comprehend Pointless anymore. And I waited. Because here's what I've learned in 64 years on this earth. Men plant, women prepare. And while Harold was planning my death, I was preparing for his reckoning every night. After he'd tucked me in and kissed my forehead the kiss of Judas. I thought he'd go downstairs and ring Fiona.
Not long now,
he'd whisper. And I'd lie there in the dark. My old Nokia tucked under my pillow, the one Claire thought I'd lost recording every single word. For 6 months I built my case. 6 months of indignity. Of being bathed like a child. Of having my own husband discuss me. Like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person he'd once promised to cherish. But I never once let on. Not even when he started researching dignified endings on the computer. He's not very good with technology, Harold. He forgets to clear the browser history. Not even when Fiona started showing up at the house, with her Bowden catalogues, measuring my curtains with her eyes. I waited for the exact right moment. And then, one Sunday morning, Harold came into the bedroom, with a cup of tea and a strange sort of brightness in his eyes.
"I've been thinking, Eileen,"
he said.
"fresh air. That's what you need. A proper drive out to the countryside. The doctors say it might do you good."
The doctors had said no such thing. But I smiled my crooked, half-paralyzed smile and managed to croak. That would be lovely. He booked the trip for the following Tuesday, which gave me exactly 4 days to make sure everything was in place. The recordings, the solicitor, the letter I'd written to Claire, hidden in the biscuit tin, with the roses on it. And when Tuesday came, I let Harold dress me. I let him wheel me to the car. I let him drive us out to Ashdown Forest, the same forest, where we'd had our first proper walk together in 1981, before he'd proposed over a thermos of Bovril and a Scotch egg. Full circle, I suppose. When he parked the car and wheeled me between those oak trees, I knew exactly what was coming. And when he said he was fetching the flask, I knew he'd never come back. So I sat there, in the cold, in the silence, and I waited exactly 17 minutes. Then I stood up. I brushed the leaves off my skirt, and I properly walked, the way I'd been practicing in secret every night, while Harold snored to the road, where my solicitor's wife was waiting in her Volvo just as we'd arranged. Because you see, I wasn't the only one who'd been preparing. But this story doesn't end in a forest. It ends in a courtroom. And what happened when I walked back through my own front door 2 days later? When Harold saw me standing there, perfectly steady on my own 2 feet with a police officer on either side of me, well, let's just say that's when the real shock began. The hardest part wasn't pretending to be paralyzed. It was pretending I still loved him. For 6 months, I became a ghost in my own home. But here's what no one tells you about pretending to be helpless. You have to commit to it completely. One slip, one moment where you reach for the remote yourself or shift your weight too naturally. And the whole thing falls apart. So I became Eileen the invalid. Eileen who needed help with everything. Eileen who stared at the wall for hours, drooling slightly, while Harold and Fiona planned my funeral over the phone. The first week was the hardest. Harold had always been useless in a crisis, bless him. When I had that stroke, which was really just me collapsing in the kitchen after hearing their phone call, letting my body go completely limp, he'd panicked so thoroughly that he'd rung 999, before he'd even checked if I was breathing. The paramedics were lovely. Young lad from Leicester kept calling me Duck. "Can you squeeze my hand, Duck? Can you tell me your name?" I stared past him, mouth slack, eyes unfocused. Harold was brilliant, I'll give him that. His performance as the devoted husband was Oscar-worthy.
"She was fine this morning,"
he said, voice breaking in all the right places. We were having breakfast.
"She just collapsed."
They took me to Queen's Medical Centre. Ran all the tests. CT scan, blood work, the lot. And here's the thing about hospital doctors. They're very good at finding what's wrong with you, but they're not particularly good at detecting what you're choosing to show them. I'd done my research, you see, 6 months before any of this started, when I'd first suspected Harold might be seeing someone. I'd looked up stroke symptoms on the NHS website. I knew exactly what to mimic. Weakness on one side. Difficulty speaking. Facial drooping. The neurologist was a tired-looking woman about my daughter's age. She shone lights in my eyes, tested. My reflexes asked Harold questions I couldn't answer. "Mrs. Thompson," she said gently, "can you tell me where you are?" I let my mouth work uselessly. Made a small sound in the back of my throat. Harold squeezed my hand.
"It's all right, love. You're in hospital. You're safe."
Safe. The word nearly made me laugh. They kept me in for 3 days. By the end of it, I had a diagnosis: severe stroke, left hemisphere damage, probable permanent disability. Harold brought grapes, the expensive ones from Waitrose. He sat beside my bed holding my hand, and I watched him check his phone every few minutes. "How is she?" Fiona would text.
"Not good,"
he'd reply.
"Doctors say she might not recover."
"Oh, darling, how awful for you."
"For us, soon,"
he'd type back. I saw every message. The man never learned to tilt his screen. When they discharged me, Harold had already converted the dining room into a bedroom.
Our bedroom upstairs was too difficult,
He said.
too many stairs.
What he meant was easier to keep me contained. He'd bought a hospital bed, one of those electric ones that go up and down. Got it second-hand off eBay, which seemed fitting somehow. Even my deathbed was a bargain.
There we are, love,
He said, helping me into it that first night. All sorted, nice and comfortable. I made a small noise, the kind a grateful invalid might make. He kissed my forehead. And that's when I truly knew that I could do this, because that kiss felt like nothing. After 42 years of marriage, his lips on my skin meant absolutely nothing. The routine began the next day. Harold would wake at 7, make himself tea, and come to check on me.
He'd pull back the curtains. Let's get some light in here, shall we?
And then he'd help me to the commode. That was the worst part, if I'm honest. The indignity of it. Having your own husband, the man who'd once loved you enough to propose over a Scotch egg, help you with your most basic needs. But I endured it. Because every time he touched me with that careful clinical detachment, I thought about Fiona. Fiona with her Bowden cardigans and her M&S lemon drizzle. Fiona who'd smiled at me over bridge hands and complimented my new curtains. Fiona who was sleeping with my husband and waiting for me to die. That thought kept me going. After the commode, Harold would wash me. Sponge bath, he called it, like I was a child. Then he'd dress me in one of my old night dresses. The ones from Debenhams that I'd bought in the sale, and wheel me into the living room.
There,
He'd say, positioning me by the window.
Nice view of the garden. You always loved the garden, didn't you?
I did love the garden. I'd spent 30 years planting those roses, pruning the lavender, nurturing the clematis over the back fence. Now I watched Harold let it all go to seed. No point keeping it up, I heard him tell Fiona one night. She can't even see it properly anymore. But I could see it. I could see everything. I could see him bringing Fiona into our house on Tuesday afternoons, when the neighbours were at work. I could see them sitting on my sofa, the John Lewis, one we'd saved up for drinking my tea from my Denby mugs. I could see the way she'd stroke his arm and say things like that, "You're so patient with her." Not every man would be. And I could see Harold preen under her attention, like a cat being scratched behind the ears.
It's not easy,
He'd say.
but she's my wife. I made vows.
Vows. I wanted to laugh or scream. Instead, I sat there in my wheelchair, dribbling slightly, watching my replacement try out for my life. Fiona started bringing things to the house. Little things at first. A different brand of biscuits, new tea towels, a scented candle from the White Company. "Just brightening the place up," she'd say when Harold thanked her. Poor Eileen can't manage it anymore, can she? Poor Eileen. Poor, helpless, paralysed Eileen. I kept the Nokia under my pillow. Every night, while Harold thought I was sleeping, I'd record their conversations. The phone was ancient, one of those old ones from 2008 with actual buttons. But that was perfect. No touchscreen to light up accidentally. No smartphone battery that died after 4 hours. Just a simple, reliable Nokia that had outlasted 3 iPhones and was now documenting my husband's betrayal. "How much longer?" Fiona asked one night. I could hear her voice through the ceiling. They were in our bedroom. In our bed.
Doctor says it could be any time,
Harold replied.
Her heart's weak. The stroke damaged more than we thought.
As if they were in it together. As if my body was a shared project they were managing. And then, Fiona's voice went soft, intimate. "And then we'll sell this place. Get something nice. Maybe one of those new builds in West Bridgeford. You've always wanted a garden room, haven't you? With bifold doors," Fiona said, and I could hear her smiling.
With bifold doors,
Harold confirmed.
and underfloor heating.
They were planning their future in my house, using my death as a blueprint for their happiness. I lay there in the dark, in the converted dining room that used to host Christmas, dinners and birthday teas, and I made a decision. I wouldn't just expose them. I'd destroy them. But first, I needed evidence, proper evidence. The kind that would hold up in court. So I started documenting everything. I had my daughter Claire come visit on Wednesdays. She'd sit beside me holding my hand, telling me about her boys' football matches and her husband's promotion. "I wish you could talk to me, Mum," she'd say, tears in her eyes. I miss our chats. And I wanted to tell her. God, how I wanted to tell her. "I'm here, Claire. I'm still here. Your father's planning to kill me and I need your help." But I couldn't. Not yet. Because Claire would have confronted Harold immediately. Would have rung the police. Would have made everything happen too fast. And I needed time. Time to build an airtight case. Time to make sure Harold couldn't wriggle out of it with his charm and his M&S jumpers. And his "I was just trying to help" routine. So instead I squeezed Claire's hand. Just once. Just enough to give her hope. "Oh, Mum," she whispered. "You're still in there, aren't you?" I squeezed again. She started visiting more often after that. 3 times a week. Then 4. And Harold started to get nervous.
"She doesn't need to come so often,"
he told Claire one afternoon. I was in my wheelchair, apparently asleep. It's upsetting for her. All the stimulation. "She's my mother," Claire said firmly. "I'll visit as much as I like." I'd never loved my daughter more than in that moment. Harold backed off, but I could see him calculating, wondering how to manage Claire, how to manage me, how to manage the situation until I finally died. The problem was I wasn't dying. 6 months in, I was healthy as a horse. Blood pressure normal. Heart strong. The GP who visited monthly kept saying things like, "Remarkable, really." Some stroke patients deteriorate rapidly, but Eileen's holding steady. Too steady. I could see it in Harold's face. The frustration. The impatience. Fiona was getting restless too. "I've given you 2 years of my life," I heard her say one night. "How much longer am I supposed to wait?"
"I'm doing my best."
Harold snapped. "What do you want me to do? Smother her with a pillow?" There was a long silence. "Would you?" Fiona asked quietly. Another silence.
"Don't be ridiculous,"
Harold said finally, but his voice had changed.
"Gone careful. Thoughtful. That's when I knew."
He was actually considering it. My own husband, the man who'd once cried at our wedding when I'd walk down the aisle in my mother's altered dress, was genuinely considering murdering me. I lay in the dark that night. Nokia recording it all, and I felt something shift inside me. Not fear. Not anymore. Clarity. This wasn't about love or marriage or 42 years of history. This was about survival. And I'd be damned if I'd let Harold Thompson and Fiona from the Bridge Club write the ending to my story. The next morning, Harold came into my room, with a strange brightness in his eyes. The same brightness he'd have later, when he suggested the trip to Ashdown Forest.
"I've been thinking, Eileen,"
he said, adjusting my blanket.
"Fresh air. That's what you need. Doctors say it might help."
The doctors had said no such thing, but I knew what he meant. He meant it's time. So I smiled my crooked smile and made my small, grateful sound. And I started preparing for the end. Not my end. His. Because the thing about being underestimated, your whole life about being seen as just a housewife, just a carer, just poor helpless Eileen, is that no one ever expects you to fight back. And that was going to be Harold's final mistake. I had 4 days to plan my resurrection. When Harold told me we were going to Ashdown Forest on Tuesday, I knew I had exactly 96 hours to prepare for the most important performance of my life. Not the performance of being paralyzed. I'd been doing that for 6 months. The performance of coming back from the dead. Sunday evening. Harold had just tucked me into bed, kissed my forehead, that Judas kiss I'd come to despise, and gone upstairs to ring Fiona. I lay there in the dark, listening to the familiar creak of the floorboards above me as he paced our bedroom. His bedroom now, really. I hadn't slept up there since the day I'd had my stroke. His voice drifted down through the ceiling.
"Tuesday,"
he said. "I've got it all planned." I reached under my pillow for the Nokia. Pressed record. Ashdown Forest. We used to go there when we were courting.
"Romantic, isn't it?"
He gave a low laugh.
"I'll tell everyone we went for a day out. Fresh air for Eileen. Doctor's orders."
And then? Fiona's voice was tinny through the phone speaker, but I could hear the eagerness in it.
"And then I'll leave her there, in her wheelchair, deep enough in the forest that no one will find her quickly.
Won't someone see you?
I'll park at the far end of the car park. Take the path that's less used. Tell her I'm fetching something from the car. By the time anyone finds her,
He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. What if she makes noise? What if someone hears? Harold's voice went cold, practical, like he was discussing fixing the boiler. She can barely make sounds anymore. Can she? Even if she tries to call out, she just makes those little noises, like an animal. No one will think twice about it. Just birds, just wind in the trees. I felt my jaw clench, like an animal. 6 months of wiping my chin, of helping me to the toilet, of tucking me in at night. And this is what he'd been thinking, that I was less than human, that I was something to be disposed of. And after, Fiona asked, what do we tell people?
the truth. Most of it, anyway. I took her for a drive. Stopped to fetch something. Came back and she was gone. Wandered off somehow. Got lost.
His voice took on a practiced tremor.
I searched everywhere. Called 999. Did everything I could. But you know how it is with stroke patients. Confused. Disoriented.
They'll believe you.
Why wouldn't they? I'm her devoted husband. I've been caring for her for months. Everyone knows how hard it's been.
I heard Fiona sigh. Content. Satisfied. And then we can finally be together.
And then we can finally be together.
Harold confirmed.
No more sneaking around. No more waiting. Just us. And the house. And the life insurance.
Life insurance. I'd forgotten about that. We'd taken out a policy years ago. 150,000 seemed like a fortune at the time. Not enough to kill someone for, I'd have thought. But apparently, I'd have been wrong. I stopped the recording and lay there in the dark, my heart hammering so hard I thought Harold might hear it upstairs. 4 days. I had 4 days to make sure I was ready. Monday morning I started with the practicalities. Claire came to visit at 11 like she always did on Mondays. She brought custard creams, my favourites, and sat beside my wheelchair, chattering about her youngest son's school play. "He's playing a tree," she said, laughing. "Can you imagine? My Jamie, a tree." "He's absolutely thrilled." I squeezed her hand. She squeezed back, smiling. "Oh, Mum, I'm so glad you can still do that. The doctors say it's a good sign." When Harold went to make tea, always the devoted husband. When Claire was watching, I did something I'd been practicing in secret for weeks. I moved my hand. Deliberately. Purposefully. I pointed at my handbag. The one sitting on the shelf by the window. Claire's eyes widened. "Mum, do you want your bag?" I squeezed her hand. "Once for yes." She fetched it, hands trembling slightly. Inside was a shopping list I'd written 6 months ago before my stroke. My handwriting clear as day. But underneath it, I'd tucked something else. A note, written in my shakiest possible scrawl, as if my paralysed hand could barely manage it. Claire, biscuits in, roses, kitchen, important. Claire read it, looked at me. Her face had gone white. "Mum, did you write this just now?" I squeezed her hand twice. "No." "Before the stroke?" One squeeze. "Yes." It was a lie, of course. I'd written it last night, but Claire didn't need to know that. "What's in the biscuit tin?" I couldn't answer. Couldn't risk it. Not yet. But I'd planted the seed. When Harold came back with the tea, Claire was holding my hand and her eyes were red.
Everything all right?
Harold asked, concern dripping from his voice like honey. "Fine," Claire said shortly. "Just hard seeing her like this." After she left, I heard her in the kitchen. Heard the cupboard open. Heard the gentle scrape of the biscuit tin being moved. Inside that tin was everything. The Nokia with 6 months of recordings. A letter I'd written, explaining everything. Every phone call. Every plan. Every moment I'd pretended to be helpless while Harold plotted my death. And a separate note, dated, and signed to be opened only if something happened to me. Claire would find it. And when she did, when Harold had left me in that forest, and I'd disappeared, she'd know exactly what to do. But I had to make sure she didn't find it too soon. That night, I heard her ring Harold. "Dad, I found something in Mum's handbag." A note. My heart stopped. "What kind of note?" Harold's voice had gone careful. Just a shopping list. From before the stroke. It made me emotional seeing her handwriting, remembering how she used to be. I could hear the relief in Harold's voice.
Oh, love, I know it's hard, but we have to be grateful she's still with us.
Still with us. For 2 more days anyway. Tuesday morning arrived grey and cold. Perfect weather for abandoning your wife in a forest. Harold woke me early.
Big day today, Eileen. Fresh air, remember? The doctors think it might help.
I made my small sound. My grateful invalid sound. He dressed me in my good cardigan. The navy one from John Lewis that Claire had bought me for Christmas. I thought that was funny somehow. Even at the end, Harold wanted me to look presentable. Wouldn't want people thinking he hadn't taken proper care of me. He wheeled me to the car, our old Vauxhall, the one we'd had for 15 years. The one with the sticker from our holiday to Cornwall in 2009, still on the back window. I'd been so happy that holiday. So stupidly, blindly happy. Harold lifted me into the passenger seat with surprising gentleness. Buckled my seatbelt, tucked my blanket around my legs.
There we are,
He said.
All comfortable?
I looked at him, really looked at him, at the grey hair that had once been dark brown, at the lines around his eyes from 42 years of smiling, at the wedding ring he still wore, even though it clearly meant nothing anymore. And I thought, this is the last time I'll see you as my husband. The next time, you'll just be a criminal. The drive to Ashdown Forest took 40 minutes. Harold chatted the whole way, pointed out landmarks.
Reminded me of the time we'd come here for a picnic. In 1981, before we were married. You wore that yellow dress.
He said, smiling at the memory.
The one with the buttons down the front. You looked like sunshine.
I wanted to ask him, when did I stop being sunshine? When did I become something you could leave in the woods to die? But I just made my small noise and stared out the window. We pulled into the car park at 2:30. Harold had chosen well. It was a weekday. Cold. Drizzling slightly. Only 2 other cars in the lot and both looked empty.
Right then,
Harold said,
getting the wheelchair from the boot. Let's get you sorted.
He wheeled me along the path, past the information board with its cheerful map of walking trails, past the bin with its little sign asking people to take their litter home. We went deeper, away from the car park, away from the main paths, until we reached a clearing between 2 old oak trees. And Harold stopped.
This is nice, isn't it?
He said. His voice sounded strange. Higher than usual. Good view. Peaceful. I looked around. He was right. It was beautiful in a stark sort of way. The kind of place you might choose for a picnic or a murder.
I'm just going to pop back to the car,
Harold said, his hands trembling as he adjusted my blanket. Left the flask on the front seat. Won't be a moment. This was it. This was the moment. I looked up at him and whispered, really whispered, using my voice for the first time in 6 months. Don't be long, love. It's getting rather chilly. Harold froze. For a second I thought I'd miscalculated. Thought he'd realize I could speak. Could move. But then his face crumpled into something that might have been grief, if I hadn't known better.
Oh, Eileen,
He said, and his voice actually cracked.
I won't be long, I promise.
He patted my hand, twice, and then he walked away. I sat there listening to his footsteps fade, listening to the wind, to a bird somewhere overhead. I counted to 60. Then I stood up. My legs wobbled slightly. 6 months of pretending to be paralyzed had actually weakened them a bit, but they held. I brushed off my skirt, straightened my cardigan, and I walked down a different path, the one that led to the service road, where my solicitor's wife was waiting in her Volvo, exactly as we'd arranged. Because you see, I'd made my own plans, and they didn't involve dying in a forest. I walked through my own front door.
Cheers.
While my husband was opening champagne with his mistress. The look on Harold's face when he saw me standing in our hallway fully upright, perfectly steady, with 2 police officers flanking me like bookends, was worth every single day of drooling into my cardigan. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what happened in those 2 days between the forest and that moment. Mrs. Patterson, my solicitor's wife, drove me straight to her house in West Bridgeford. She had the kettle on before I'd even sat down properly. "Tea?" she asked, which is the most British response to attempted murder I've ever heard. "Please," I said, and hearing my own voice after 6 months of silence felt like learning to speak all over again. My hands were shaking, not from fear I'd used up all my fear months ago, from adrenaline, from relief, from the sheer bloody exhaustion of pretending to be helpless for half a year. Mrs. Patterson set a proper cup and saucer in front of me. "None of your mugs," china with pink roses on it. "Digestive?" she offered, pushing the biscuit tin toward me. I started to laugh. I couldn't help it. Here I was, escaped from my husband's murder plot, and we were having tea and biscuits like it was a normal Tuesday afternoon. "I'm sorry," I said, wiping my eyes. Mrs. Patterson smiled. "Well, we can't let the side down, can we? Even during a crisis." While I drank my tea, she rang her husband, Malcolm Patterson, my solicitor, and then she rang the police. Within an hour, I was sitting in a quiet room at the police station, telling my story to a detective sergeant who looked about 12 years old. "Let me get this straight, Mrs. Thompson," he said, pen poised over his notebook. "You've been pretending to be paralyzed for 6 months?" "Yes." "To catch your husband planning to murder you?" "Yes." "And you have recordings of these plans?" I pulled out the Nokia, 6 months old, battered with a crack across the screen, from where I'd dropped it once, reaching under my pillow. "But it worked." "Every conversation," I said. "Every phone call. Every detail." The detective's eyebrows went up as he listened to Harold's voice coming through the tiny speaker. "I'll leave her there, deep enough in the forest that no one will find her quickly, by the time anyone finds her. Like an animal." We sat there for 3 hours. Me talking, him writing, the recordings playing, my voice getting stronger with every word. At one point, a female officer brought me another cup of tea. "You're very brave," she said quietly. I shook my head. "I'm not brave. I'm just tired of being treated like I'm already dead." They sent officers to Ashdown Forest immediately, found my wheelchair exactly where Harold had left it, between those 2 oak trees, and they sent officers to my house. That's where it gets interesting. According to the police report, which I read later, every word of it, Harold had returned home at approximately 4:47 p.m. He'd rung 999 at 5:03 p.m., claiming his wife had disappeared from her wheelchair while he'd gone to fetch something from the car. The operator noted he sounded distressed but composed. Composed. Of course he was composed. He'd been planning this for months. The police who responded to his call were sympathetic, took his statement, organised a search party, told him not to worry, they'd find me. Harold played his part perfectly. The devoted husband, frantic with worry. The carer who'd done everything right and still lost his wife to tragic circumstances. But what Harold didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that while he was giving his statement to the police, another set of officers was already listening to his voice on my Nokia. The trap had already closed. He just didn't know it yet. They let him sweat for 2 days. 2 days of organising search parties, of having concerned neighbours bring casseroles, of accepting condolences from people who thought I was dead, or dying in the forest somewhere. And do you know what Harold did? On the evening of the 2nd day, he invited Fiona over. I know this because the police had already put surveillance on the house. They wanted to catch them together. Wanted proof that this wasn't just a murder plot, but a conspiracy. They got their proof. According to the officers watching from their unmarked car across the street, Fiona arrived at 7:30 p.m., carrying a bottle of Prosecco and an overnight bag. At 8:15 p.m., they opened the curtains in the living room, my living room, with my sofa, and my mugs and toasted each other. At 8:47 p.m., Fiona was sitting in my armchair, the one by the window where I used to do my knitting, flipping through paint samples. "Magnolia's too bland," she apparently said. "What about this sage green?" They were redecorating. While I was officially missing, possibly dead, my husband and his mistress were choosing paint colours for my house. That's when the police decided it was time. They rang me at the Pattersons' house. We're ready, Mrs. Thompson. Are you? Was I ready? I'd been ready for 6 months. Mrs. Patterson drove me home. We pulled up outside my own house at 9:23 p.m. I know the exact time because I checked my watch, the one Harold had given me for our 30th anniversary. The police were waiting. 2 officers, a man and a woman, both in uniform. Are you sure about this? The female officer asked. We can arrest them without you being here. I'm sure, I said, because I needed to see his face, needed to see Fiona's face, needed them to see me standing, walking, very much alive. We walked up the path to my own front door, the door with the number 47 that I'd polished every week for 30 years. The door with the brass knocker, shaped like a lion that Harold's mother had given us as a wedding present. The officer knocked. I heard footsteps. Harold's footsteps, the ones I'd listened to for 42 years. The door opened. Harold stood there in his slippers and his good shirt, the one he saved for special occasions, holding a glass of Prosecco. He looked at the officers first. His face arranged itself into concern. Have you found her? Is there news? Then he saw me, and his face did something extraordinary. It went through about 6 different expressions in 3 seconds. Confusion, recognition, shock, fear, and then a desperate attempt at joy.
Eileen!
He said. And I'll give him this, his voice actually broke.
Oh my God, Eileen! You're alive! You're walking!
Yes, I said calmly. Funny how that works, isn't it? The body heals when the will to survive is strong enough. Behind Harold in my living room, I could see Fiona. She'd frozen with her glass halfway to her mouth, her face the colour of my good cream curtains. Mr. Thompson, the male officer said, we need you to come with us.
What? Why? My wife's been found. This is wonderful. We should be celebrating.
We'll be celebrating something, I said, just not what you think. That's when I pulled out the Nokia. Would you like to hear yourself, Harold? Planning to leave me in the forest? Discussing how long it would take me to die? Calling me an animal? His mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. For 42 years, I'd never seen Harold Thompson speechless. It was glorious.
You can't. That's not.
Harold Thompson, the officer said formally. I'm arresting you on suspicion of attempted murder and conspiracy to murder. They read him his rights while Fiona started crying. Not dignified crying. Proper sobbing with mascara running down her face and her nose going red. I didn't know, she wailed. He said.
You were dying anyway.
He said.
It was a mercy.
A mercy, I repeated. How kind of you both. They arrested her too. Conspiracy, they said. The recordings made it clear she'd known exactly what Harold was planning. As they led them out, Harold in handcuffs, Fiona still sobbing, my neighbours came out to watch. The Johnsons from across the street. Even old Mr. Williams from number 52, who never missed anything. I stood in my doorway and watched my husband get put into a police car. He looked back at me once, and I smiled. Not a triumphant smile. Not angry, just free. The trial took 8 months. Harold pleaded not guilty at first, claimed the recordings were fake, claimed I'd misunderstood, claimed he'd been under stress and didn't mean any of it. His barrister argued that thinking about murder wasn't the same as attempting it. But then they found his internet search history. How long does hypothermia take? Death from exposure. What temperature kills? All dated from the weeks before our trip to Ashdown Forest. Hard to explain that away. He changed his plea to guilty. Got 12 years? Fiona got 3 years as an accessory. She cried through the entire sentencing. Kept saying she was sorry that she'd made a mistake. I didn't testify at the trial. Didn't need to. The recording said everything. But I was there for the sentencing. Sat in the gallery in my good navy suit, the one I'd worn to my daughter's wedding. When the judge read out the sentence, Harold looked up at me. I don't know what he expected to see. Anger, satisfaction, victory. He saw none of those things. Because I'd stopped being angry months ago. I'd stopped being anything to Harold Thompson except a woman who'd survived him. After the trial, Claire took me for lunch. Proper lunch at a nice restaurant in town. White tablecloths and everything? Mum, she said, holding my hand across the table. I'm so sorry. I should have known. Should have seen. Stop, I said gently. You couldn't have known. I made sure no one knew. That was the point. But 6 months. 6 months of pretending. How did you bear it? I thought about that. How did I bear it? Because I knew it was temporary, I said finally. The pretending, the helplessness, the humiliation. I knew it had an ending. And I knew I got to write that ending, not him. What will you do now? Good question. I was 64 years old. My husband was in prison. My house was my own again. My life was my own again. What would I do? I'm going to plant roses, I said. The garden's gone to ruin. I'm going to fix it. And I did. That first spring after the trial, I planted 20 new rose bushes. Pink ones, red ones, white ones with edges like lace. I hired a gardener to help with the heavy work, lovely young man from Poland. Built like a rugby player, but gentle with the plants. I had the dining room converted back from a sick room to a proper dining room. Got rid of that horrible hospital bed. Bought a new table from a charity shop and had it delivered. I joined a book club. Not the one Fiona had been in. I heard she'd moved away after her release. Went to live with a sister in Devon. Good riddance. And sometimes on quiet evenings I'd sit in my armchair. The one Fiona had sat in while planning to redecorate my house. And I'd think about those 6 months. People asked me sometimes if I regretted it. The pretending. The degradation. I never regretted it for a second. Because those 6 months taught me something I'd spent 64 years not knowing. I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. Not physically. My legs were still wobbly sometimes, from all those months of sitting still. But inside, where it mattered, I was steel-wrapped in cardigans and politeness. I was a woman who'd survived being left for dead by the man, who'd promised to love her, and I was a woman who'd chosen herself, finally. After 42 years of choosing Harold, choosing peace, choosing to be quiet and accommodating and good, I'd chosen myself. A few months ago, Claire brought her boys round for tea. My grandsons, 7 and 9, running through my garden, playing football among the roses. The youngest one asked me, "Granny, is it true Grandad's in prison?" Claire started to shush him, but I waved her off. "Yes, love, it's true." "Why?" "Because he did something very wrong. And wrong actions have consequences." "Did it make you sad?" I thought about that. Really thought about it. "At first," I said. "But now it makes me grateful." "Why?" "Because I learned something important. I learned that even when someone tries to make you small, to make you helpless, to make you nothing, you still get to choose who you are." He nodded solemnly, not quite understanding but sensing the importance of it. Then he ran off to chase his brother and Claire hugged me. "You're extraordinary, Mum," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm just Eileen." And that turned out to be enough. I'm 66 now. Harold will be in prison for another 7 years, if he serves his full sentence. I don't think about him much anymore. But I think about her sometimes. The woman I was before all this. The woman who made breakfast every morning and bit her tongue and kept the peace and slowly disappeared into the wallpaper of her own life. I think about her with compassion. She did the best she could with what she knew. But I'm grateful I'm not her anymore, because that woman would have died in Ashdown Forest. And this woman, the one I am, now she plants roses. She has tea with her grandsons. She chooses herself every single day. And she smiles, really smiles for the first time in 42 years. If you're listening to this and you feel invisible, if someone's made you believe you're helpless, useless, finished, if you're drowning in a life that was supposed to be yours, but somehow became someone else's, let me tell you something. You are not helpless. You are not invisible. You are not finished. You are steel wrapped in whatever armor you choose to wear, and you can choose yourself. It's never too late. I was 64 when I chose, and it saved my life. And it saved my life. Thank you for listening. Please consider subscribing to Thursday Story Cafe. By subscribing, you'll be invited back for more gentle stories.